My name is Hugo Walker, and I am 27 years old. I once believed family meant unconditional love and trust. For years, my father was my hero, my mentor, and my best friend. Then he met her. Everything changed when his new wife decided I was in her way. The day I overheard them laughing about cutting me out of my own future should have broken me. Instead, I stayed silent. That silence became my most powerful weapon. Before I tell you how this all unfolded, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe to see how my quiet patience demolished their perfect life. Growing up, my relationship with my father, Thomas Walker, was something special. We were inseparable, especially after we lost Mom. I was 19 when cancer took her from us. Those early days after her passing were the darkest of my life, but my dad and I found our way through the grief together. We would stay up late, looking through old family albums, sharing stories about Mom, and somehow finding strength in each other when it felt like the world had collapsed around us. Dad owned Walker Development, a property development company that had grown from a small local operation to a regional powerhouse in the Northeast. From the moment I started college, studying architecture and business management, Dad brought me into the company. It started with summer internships, then weekend work during school, and finally a full-time position after graduation. "This will all be yours someday, son," he would tell me, his hand on my shoulder as we walked through construction sites together. "You have the vision to take this company places I never could." I believed him. For 8 years, I poured everything I had into Walker Development. While my friends were traveling, exploring different career paths, or enjoying their 20s, I was learning every aspect of the business. I worked in accounting, sales, project management, and finally design, where my passion truly lived. My specialty became sustainable building designs. I saw the future of construction in eco-friendly materials, energy-efficient systems, and buildings that worked with nature rather than against it. Dad was initially skeptical, but came around when he saw the growing market demand and my enthusiasm. "You were right about this green building stuff," he admitted after we landed our first major sustainable housing project. "You see around corners, Hugo. That is going to make you an exceptional leader when the time comes." Those words meant everything to me. Dad was grooming me to eventually take over the family business, and I worked tirelessly to prove I was worthy of that trust. We had a 5-year succession plan mapped out. I would transition into the role of Chief Operations Officer next year, work alongside Dad for 3 years, and then step into the CEO position when he semi-retired. Jackson and Layla, my 2 closest friends since college, used to tease me about how much I talked about the company and my father. "Dude, there is more to life than making Daddy proud," Jackson would joke during our rare nights out. Layla was more understanding. "Your dedication to your family business is admirable, Hugo. Just do not forget to build your own life, too." I always brushed off their concerns. The company was my life. Dad was the only close family I had left. The future seemed clear and secure. We had weekly dinner meetings at his house to discuss business strategies and upcoming projects. On my 25th birthday, Dad gave me a beautiful vintage watch that had belonged to my grandfather. "A future CEO needs a proper timepiece," he said, eyes shining with pride. I wore that watch every day as a reminder of where I came from and where I was headed. My office at Walker Development was right next to my father's, with adjoining doors that were usually open so we could freely exchange ideas throughout the day. Everything was perfect, until Veronica Blackwell walked into our lives and changed everything. 2 years ago, Dad attended the annual Riverside Charity Gala, an event we usually went to together. That year, I was overseeing a project in Boston and couldn't make it back in time. When I called to check in the next day, there was something different in his voice. "I met someone," he said, sounding almost shy. "Her name is Veronica. She runs an art gallery downtown." In the beginning, I was happy for him. Mom had been gone for 6 years, and Dad had dated occasionally, but never seemed interested in a serious relationship. Veronica was 43, sophisticated, and charming. When Dad first introduced us over dinner, she made a genuine effort to get to know me, asking thoughtful questions about my work and interests. "Thomas talks about you constantly," she said, touching my father's hand affectionately. "He says, you are the future of Walker Development." Dad beamed at her words, and I felt a wave of gratitude. Maybe this relationship would be good for him. The whirlwind nature of their romance was my first concern. Within 3 months, Dad was completely transformed. He started dressing differently, frequenting art shows and wine tastings, and spending less time at the office. After only 6 months of dating, he announced they were getting married. "Are you sure this isn't too fast?" I asked carefully one evening in his office. "When you know, he replied, looking younger than I had seen him in years. "Veronica brings joy back into my life, Hugo. I thought that part of me died with your mother. How could I argue with that? So I threw myself into supporting their relationship, helping plan the small wedding ceremony, giving a heartfelt toast as best man, and welcoming Veronica into our family with open arms despite my private reservations. The problems began subtly after they returned from their 3-week honeymoon in Europe. Veronica started showing up at the office unannounced, sitting in on meetings, and offering opinions on company matters. At first, it seemed harmless. Dad was clearly smitten and enjoyed having her involved. Then came the day Veronica brought her daughter Amanda to the office. 24 years old, fresh out of a business degree, and according to Veronica, absolutely brilliant with numbers. "Thomas, darling, remember we discussed possibly finding a place for Amanda here?" Veronica said sweetly during a staff lunch. Perhaps she could shadow Hugo and learn the ropes. Dad immediately agreed. "Great idea. Hugo can show her how we do things at Walker Development." I tried to be welcoming to Amanda, creating a training schedule and including her in appropriate meetings. But it quickly became clear that she had little interest in learning from me. Instead, she spent most of her time in Dad's office, building a separate relationship with him. One day, I presented a new sustainable apartment complex design to Dad, something we had been discussing for months. He had always supported my green initiatives, but this time, his reaction was different. "I do not know, Hugo," he said, frowning at the plans. "The upfront costs are significant. Perhaps we should stick with conventional construction for now." Later that same day, I overheard Veronica in his office. "Thomas, those eco-friendly projects are so risky. The margins are much smaller. I worry Hugo is too idealistic for the real business world." That was the first time I noticed Dad nodding along with her criticism of me. Something cold settled in my stomach. When I tried to revisit the project the next day, Dad waved it away. "Veronica made some good points about the financial risks. Let us put your green building on hold for now." Within 3 months of the wedding, Veronica had redecorated Dad's house, removing most traces of our family history. Photos of Mom disappeared from the walls, replaced by expensive abstract art. When I mentioned it, Dad seemed uncomfortable. "Veronica has an excellent eye for design. The house needed updating." The final straw in this initial phase came when Dad announced a new organizational structure for the company. Amanda was being given a newly created position, Director of Financial Strategy, reporting directly to my father. But that overlaps with half of my responsibilities, I pointed out during a private conversation in his office. "Amanda has fresh ideas," Dad replied, not meeting my eyes. "And Veronica thinks we need new perspectives in leadership." There it was, Veronica thinks. Those words became the new decision-making standard at Walker Development. And increasingly, what Veronica thought was that I was an obstacle to whatever plans she had for my father and his company. Over the next 6 months, my position at Walker Development became increasingly precarious. Projects I had initiated were postponed or canceled. My input in meetings was frequently dismissed or questioned. Dad, who had once proudly introduced me as his successor, now rarely mentioned the future leadership of the company at all. Veronica's presence in the office became a regular occurrence. She had a knack for arriving just before important meetings, pulling Dad aside for brief, private conversations, after which he would often change his mind about previously agreed-upon decisions. The restructuring gave Amanda authority to review and approve project budgets, a responsibility that had been part of my role since my promotion to operations director 3 years earlier. The first time she rejected one of my proposals, returning it with condescending notes about fiscal responsibility, I went straight to my father. "Dad, this is getting ridiculous. Amanda just declined the Miller Street renovation budget that you and I already approved last month." Thomas sighed, rubbing his temples. "Hugo, you need to work with Amanda, not against her. Your budget projections were too optimistic. She showed me the numbers herself." "Too optimistic? We have worked with that contractor for years. Those numbers are solid." "I think you are taking this too personally," Dad replied. "Amanda is just doing her job. Maybe you could learn something from her practical approach." Learn something? From someone with no real-world experience who had been handed a director-level position because her mother married the boss. I bit my tongue to keep from saying something I would regret. Later that week, I overheard Veronica talking to Dad in his office while I was working late. "Thomas, I am concerned about Hugo's attitude. Amanda is trying so hard to work with him, but he seems resistant to any ideas that are not his own." "He has always been stubborn," my father replied, his voice weary. "Gets that from his mother. I wonder if perhaps he is holding the company back," Veronica said softly. "All these experimental green projects when traditional development is your bread and butter. And the way he guards his relationships with clients, almost like he is building his own personal following rather than serving Walker Development." I froze outside the door, unable to believe what I was hearing. Was she actually suggesting I was being disloyal to the company I had helped build? Worse, was my father entertaining these thoughts? The next morning, Dad called me into his office to discuss concerns about my approach to client management. For the first time in my career, I was being formally reprimanded by my own father based on Veronica's insinuations. During a company-wide meeting the following week, Dad announced that Amanda would be taking lead on our newest and most prestigious project, a luxury condominium development downtown. This was a project I had helped secure through my relationship with the landowner, who was an old college friend. "I thought I would be heading this one," I said to Dad afterward. "I brought in the deal. Amanda has impressed the executive team with her financial models for the project," he replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "And she has some innovative design ideas that Veronica thinks could really set this development apart." Innovative design ideas from Amanda, who had never designed anything in her life. My friends noticed the changes. Jackson came to visit me at the office and was shocked by the new dynamic. "Dude, what is going on here? Your stepmom is sitting in what used to be your conference room, and she just introduced herself to me as the company's new strategic consultant. Is that even a real position?" Layla was more direct after joining me for what turned out to be a tense family dinner at Dad's house. "Hugo, they are pushing you out," she whispered as we left. "You see that, right?" I saw it, but couldn't quite believe it. This was my father, the man who had raised me, who had built this company with the intention of passing it on to me. How could he allow this to happen? One evening, I stayed late to catch up on work and accidentally discovered something disturbing. Veronica had been using the company computer in Dad's office to research my past, my educational background, even my credit history. Why was she digging into my personal information? Around the same time, I noticed colleagues starting to distance themselves from me. People who had been friendly for years suddenly became formal and guarded in our interactions. It was as if they sensed which way the wind was blowing and didn't want to be associated with someone who was falling out of favor. Despite everything, I refused to give up. I had one more card to play. For months, I had been developing a proposal for a major sustainable housing development that could revolutionize our business model and position Walker Development as an industry leader in green building. This project would generate substantial profits while also creating positive environmental impact. It was innovative, but financially sound, with interest already expressed by several potential investors. I scheduled a special presentation and invited the entire executive team, determined to remind everyone, especially my father, of the value I brought to the company. The day of my presentation arrived. I had spent weeks perfecting every detail, gathering data, creating compelling visuals, and preparing responses to any possible objection. This was more than just a project proposal. It was my statement of value to the company, my vision for our future. The conference room was full. Dad sat at the head of the table, Veronica beside him, though she held no official position. Amanda was there too, along with our chief financial officer, head of marketing, and several other executives. For 45 minutes, I presented my vision for Riverside Heights, a mixed-use development that would include affordable housing units, green spaces, solar power generation, and energy-efficient design. The financial projections showed healthy returns within 3 years, with substantial profit potential long-term. I had letters of interest from 3 major investors and preliminary approval from the city planning department. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then, to my surprise, Dad nodded appreciatively. "Impressive work, Hugo. You have clearly put a lot of thought into this. Let us take some time to review the details before making a decision." It was the most positive response I had received from him in months. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. That hope was shattered just 2 days later. I had stayed late to finish some paperwork when I decided to check if Dad had left any notes on my proposal in our shared digital folder. What I found instead was an email chain between him and Veronica that had been accidentally saved there. "What should we do about Hugo's project?" Dad had written. Veronica's response made my blood run cold. "We need to let him down gently. Remember our plan to phase him out of leadership? Amanda's downtown project needs to be our focus now. Besides, all this green building nonsense is just Hugo trying to make his mark. The board won't approve it anyway, not after I've spoken with Richard and Mary." Richard and Mary were our most conservative board members. Veronica had been cultivating their friendship at social events for months. Dad's reply was worse. "You're right, as always. I'll tell Hugo we're tabling his project indefinitely. It's time to move forward with the succession changes we discussed." Succession changes. The words hit me like a physical blow. They had been planning this all along. I could barely sleep that night. The next morning, a company-wide email announced a special board meeting for the following day. When I asked Dad about it, he was evasive, saying only that there were important strategic matters to discuss. I arrived at the board meeting to find printed copies of my Riverside Heights proposal at each seat. For a brief, confused moment, I thought perhaps they were going to approve it after all. Then Dad called the meeting to order, and everything became horrifyingly clear. "As you all know, Walker Development has been considering new directions for future growth," he began. "Today, we are evaluating 2 potential development opportunities. My proposal was presented first, with Dad giving a strangely watered-down summary that emphasized risks while minimizing potential benefits. Then Amanda stood up and unveiled her alternative. A luxury high-rise in the downtown area, with premium amenities and select green features that were clearly copied from my previous presentations, but significantly scaled back. The financial projections for the Blackwell Tower show a faster return on investment with lower initial costs, she explained, using my father's last name rather than her own, a subtle but pointed choice. I watched in disbelief as the board members nodded along. When the vote came, it was 8-1 in favor of Amanda's project, with only our longtime CFO, George, supporting my proposal. After the meeting, I asked Dad to speak privately in his office. My hands were shaking as I closed the door behind us. "What just happened?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You and I had a 5-year succession plan. I was supposed to be COO next year." Dad sighed heavily, looking suddenly older. "Plans change, Hugo. The company needs to move in a different direction." "Different from what?" "From me? Dad, we built this company together after Mom died. This was going to be my legacy too." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I've decided to restructure the leadership team. Amanda will be taking over as COO, with potential for advancement to CEO in the future. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Amanda? She's been here less than a year. She doesn't know the first thing about this business. She has fresh perspectives. And frankly, Hugo, I'm not sure you have what it takes to lead this company. Your focus on these experimental green projects shows a lack of business acumen. His words hit me like a slap. A lack of business acumen? The sustainable housing development I led last year delivered 15% above projected profits. That was one project. Amanda has a more comprehensive vision for the company's future. Amanda has whatever vision Veronica tells her to have. I shot back, finally losing my composure. Dad's face hardened. I think you should take some time off, Hugo. Clear your head. When you come back, we can discuss a new position for you. Something more suited to your abilities. I left his office in a daze, too shocked to even respond. As I packed up some personal items from my desk, I realized I had forgotten my phone in the small lounge area near Dad's office. Approaching quietly, I heard laughter from behind his partially open door. You should have seen his face when you told him about Amanda becoming COO, Veronica was saying, her voice light with amusement. He looked like a kid who had his candy taken away, Dad replied, chuckling. I feel bad, but it's for the best. He's too much like his mother, too soft for this business. Once we transition Amanda into leadership and adjust the succession plan, he'll accept his new role eventually, Veronica said confidently. And if not, well, there are other architectural firms that might hire him. I've already updated my will and the company succession documents, Dad added. Amanda will be well positioned to take over when I retire. I stood frozen in the hallway, a cold numbness spreading through me. The man laughing in that office wasn't the father I knew. He was a stranger who had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. I wanted to burst into the room, to scream, to demand an explanation. Instead, I silently retrieved my phone and walked out of the building. That night was the darkest of my life. Sitting alone in my apartment, surrounded by architectural models and design plans for a future that no longer existed, I cycled through rage, disbelief, and crushing disappointment. I called Jackson and Layla, who came over immediately with takeout food and concerned expressions. I could confront him publicly, I said, pacing my living room. Tell everyone what they're doing. I could sue for wrongful termination. You could, Jackson agreed. But from what you've told us, your dad and Veronica have been planning this for months. They've probably covered their legal bases. Layla, always the more strategic thinker, was quiet for a long time before speaking. What if you didn't react the way they expect? What if instead of fighting loudly, you stayed silent and watched? Stay silent? After what they did? Think about it, Hugo, she said. They're expecting you to explode, to create a scene they can use to further paint you as unstable or unsuitable for leadership. What if you denied them that satisfaction and planned your next move carefully instead? Something about her words resonated with me. The image of my father and Veronica laughing at my pain flashed through my mind. They had already decided who I was and what I would do. What if I proved them wrong? The next morning, I returned to the office, calm and composed. Dad looked surprised to see me. I thought about what you said, I told him with a measured voice. I'd like to stay on and find where I can best contribute to the company. The relief on his face was evident. He had expected a confrontation, perhaps even my resignation. My apparent acceptance of the new reality clearly made things easier for him. That's mature of you, Hugo. We'll find a good role for your talents. What Dad didn't know was that I had already begun forming a plan, not one born of vengeance, but of self-preservation and a determination to build something true to my values. That afternoon, I sought out George Thompson, our CFO, who had been with the company since its early days and had voted for my project at the board meeting. Can I speak with you privately, George? I asked. Away from the office, at a quiet coffee shop, George confirmed what I had suspected. They've been systematically reducing your authority for months, Hugo. Veronica has been remarkably effective at influencing the board, and Amanda is just a puppet, following her mother's directions. Have there been other changes I should know about? George hesitated. There have been some concerning decisions, cost-cutting measures that might compromise quality. Several experienced project managers have been replaced with friends of Veronica's. And there are rumors about unusual financial transactions that I haven't been fully briefed on. This information was valuable, but I knew I needed to be careful about how I proceeded. Direct accusations without evidence would only make me appear bitter. Over the next few weeks, I adopted a strategy of quiet observation. I accepted the diminished role I was given, overseeing smaller projects with limited authority. I was unfailingly polite to Veronica and Amanda, even as they continued to undermine me. I attended meetings, offered ideas when asked, and generally presented the image of someone who had accepted their new position in the hierarchy. Meanwhile, I began documenting everything. I created a detailed record of questionable business decisions, instances where quality was sacrificed for quick profits, and cases where Amanda's inexperience led to costly mistakes that were quietly covered up. I noted when loyal employees were pushed out and replaced with Veronica's connections. All of this was done discreetly, without confrontation or accusation. I also started reaching out to key clients, not to disparage the company, but to maintain the relationships I had built over years. Many expressed concern about the changes they were seeing at Walker Development. "The quality isn't the same, Hugo," said Michael Robertson, one of our biggest clients. "And that sustainable approach you brought to our last project? That's what made us choose Walker over competitors. Is the company moving away from that?" "The leadership is exploring different directions," I answered carefully. "What matters to you most in your development partners?" These conversations gave me valuable insights into client priorities and concerns, which I filed away for future reference. During this time, I also began developing my own business plan centered on sustainable construction. Nights and weekends were spent researching, planning, and making discreet connections with potential investors who believed in my vision for environmentally responsible development. One such potential investor was Eleanor Michaels, a wealthy environmentalist who had long advocated for sustainable building practices. "I've been waiting for someone with your credentials to propose something like this," she told me after reviewing my preliminary business plan. "The market is ready for a company that puts sustainability first, rather than treating it as an afterthought." As I built these new connections, I was careful to maintain absolute professionalism regarding Walker Development. I never disparaged the company or my father, never revealed internal problems, and never breached any confidentiality agreements. My integrity would be the foundation of whatever came next. At home, I focused on rebuilding my sense of self-worth. For so long, my identity had been tied to being Thomas Walker's son and future heir to his company. Now, I had to rediscover who Hugo Walker was on his own terms. Layla helped me through this process. "Your value was never actually about your position in that company," she reminded me. "It was about your vision, your work ethic, your integrity. Those things can't be taken from you." 6 months into my silent strategy, an unexpected discovery accelerated my timeline. While organizing some old company files I had been asked to archive, I came across information about Veronica that she had carefully kept hidden. This wasn't her first marriage to a wealthy businessman. It was her third. And in both previous cases, the companies her husbands owned had faced serious financial difficulties shortly after she entered the picture. One had declared bankruptcy, while the other had been sold at a fraction of its value. In both cases, Veronica had walked away with significant settlements. The pattern was clear and concerning. Was history repeating itself at Walker Development? With this new information, I knew the time was coming to make my move. I accelerated my preparations, finalizing my business plan, securing financial commitments from investors, and discreetly reaching out to talented colleagues who might be interested in joining a new venture. All the while, I maintained my calm, cooperative facade at Walker Development, watching as Amanda's inexperience led to increasingly serious problems, and Veronica's influence pushed the company toward questionable business practices. The foundation of my new life was taking shape, built on the silence my father and Veronica had mistaken for defeat. After 8 months of careful planning, the time for my exit arrived with perfect synchronicity. Amanda's first major project, the Blackwell Tower, was facing serious problems. Construction costs had far exceeded estimates, design flaws had been discovered late in the process, and the project was now significantly behind schedule. The company was facing financial strain as a result, though this was being carefully concealed from most employees and all clients. I had scheduled meetings with several key clients of Walker Development, not to poach them, but to properly transition my projects to other managers as I prepared for my departure. One such client was Robert Chen, who had worked exclusively with me on 3 major developments. "So someone else will be taking over the Harrison Street project?" he asked, clearly concerned. "Yes, I'm making a career change," I explained without elaboration. "Hugo, we chose Walker Development because of you. Your approach to sustainable building aligns with our company values." He hesitated. "I should tell you, we've been concerned about some of the changes we've observed recently." This was a sentiment I had heard repeatedly over the past few months. Without my solicitation, multiple clients expressed dissatisfaction with the new direction of Walker Development under the influence of Veronica and Amanda. My financial backing was now secured. Eleanor Michaels had not only invested significantly in my new venture, but had brought in additional investors who shared our vision for sustainable development. Office space had been leased, initial staff hired discreetly, and all legal foundations established for Walker Sustainable Development, a name I chose deliberately. The morning I planned to resign, I arrived early and placed a sealed envelope on my father's desk. Then I went to my own office and waited. An hour later, Dad stormed in, the opened letter in his hand. "What is this, Hugo? You're resigning? After everything this company has done for you?" I remained calm, my voice steady. "Yes, I am. My last day will be 2 weeks from today, as stated in the letter. This is about Amanda's promotion, isn't it? You're still bitter that we chose her vision over yours." "No, Dad. This is about me recognizing that my future lies elsewhere. I'm grateful for everything I've learned at Walker Development." The words were difficult to say, but I maintained my composure. He scoffed. "And where exactly do you think you're going? Starting your own firm? Good luck with that. You'll come crawling back when you realize how hard it is out there, without the Walker name behind you." "I appreciate your concern," I replied evenly, "but I've made my decision." His face reddened. "Fine. Clean out your desk today. We don't need the 2 weeks." I had anticipated this reaction and was prepared. "As you wish. I'll inform the clients I've been working with about the immediate transition." "My assistant can handle that," he snapped. "With all due respect, I believe the clients deserve to hear directly from me. It's the professional thing to do." Before he could argue further, his phone rang. From his expression as he answered, I could tell it was bad news about the Blackwell Tower project. He waved me away distractedly, already focused on the latest crisis. As I packed my belongings, Veronica appeared in my doorway. "I hear congratulations are in order," she said with a smirk. "Finally moving on to new opportunities." "That's right," I agreed pleasantly. "Change can be a good thing. Thomas is upset now, but he'll get over it. This is really for the best, Hugo. The company needs to move in a different direction." I smiled. I couldn't agree more. Her confidence faltered slightly at my easy agreement. She had expected anger or bitterness, not this calm acceptance. "Well, good luck with whatever small projects you manage to find," she added, attempting to reassert her superiority. I simply nodded and continued packing. Later that day, I met with my father one last time in his office. He had calmed somewhat, though his disappointment was evident. "I don't understand why you're doing this, Hugo. This company was supposed to be your inheritance." "Plans change," I said, echoing his words from months ago. "But before I go, there's something I think you should know." I placed a folder on his desk. "What's this?" he asked suspiciously. "Information about Veronica that you might find relevant. Did you know this is her 3rd marriage to a business owner? or that both previous companies faced financial collapse shortly after she became involved. His face paled. "What are you talking about?" "I'm not making accusations, Dad. Just sharing facts I discovered during my archival work. You might also want to look into some of the financial decisions made in the past 6 months. George has been trying to get your attention about some irregularities. If this is some attempt to turn me against Veronica out of jealousy—" "It's not," I interrupted gently. "It's me caring about you and the company you built, despite everything. Do with the information what you will." I stood to leave, pausing at the door. "By the way, I've started my own firm, Walker Sustainable Development. Several of your clients have already expressed interest in working with me, including Robert Chen and the Michaels Group." Now he looked truly shocked. "The Michaels Group?" "Eleanor Michaels hasn't worked with a new developer in 15 years. She believes in my vision," I said simply, "as do many others." 2 days later, I officially launched Walker Sustainable Development with a small but significant announcement in industry publications. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Not only did several major clients from Walker Development reach out to discuss transferring their projects to my new company, but other businesses who had heard about my innovative approach to sustainable building expressed interest as well. Within a week, news reached me that the Blackwell Tower project was in serious trouble. A major design flaw had been discovered that would require extensive and expensive corrections. Amanda was publicly taking responsibility as the project lead, but the financial impact on Walker Development was substantial. I took no pleasure in these difficulties, but I couldn't help noting the irony. The very project that had been chosen over my sustainable development proposal was now threatening the company's stability. 2 weeks after my departure, I received an unexpected call from George. "Your father has been asking questions," he said quietly, "about the financial irregularities, about Veronica's past. I think he's finally opening his eyes." "That's his journey," I replied. "I've moved on. He misses you, Hugo, though he'd never admit it. And the company is struggling without you. Those client relationships you built over the years, many of them are following you." It was true. In less than a month, Walker Sustainable Development had secured contracts with 6 former Walker Development clients, including 2 major ones. We had also attracted new business based on our commitment to environmentally responsible building practices. The final confirmation that my silent strategy had succeeded came a month later. Dad called me directly, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "The Blackwell Tower project is a disaster," he admitted. "We're going to lose millions, and there are other issues. Financial discrepancies that George has brought to my attention. Decisions made without proper authorization." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. A long pause. "Hugo, is there any chance we could meet? To talk?" "About what?" "About possibly working together again. Combining resources. Your new company is doing remarkably well, and Walker Development could benefit from your sustainable approach." He hesitated. "And I miss having my son in my life." The request surprised me, touching a place in my heart I thought had hardened. But I wasn't the same person who had desperately sought his approval. "I'm open to discussing a potential business collaboration," I said carefully. "But it would have to be as equals, not as father and son. My company remains independent." "I understand," he said quickly. "And Veronica. She's taking some time away. We're reevaluating our relationship." I didn't respond to that. It wasn't my place anymore. "I'll have my assistant set up a meeting," I said instead. "We can discuss potential areas for collaboration." As I ended the call, I felt a strange sense of peace. The silent strategy had worked better than I could have imagined. Not through vengeance or dramatic confrontation, but through patience, professionalism, and unwavering focus on building something valuable. The perfect life my father and Veronica had constructed was crumbling under the weight of their own poor decisions, while I had created something new and meaningful from the ruins of their betrayal. 1 year after leaving Walker Development, I stood in the lobby of our new headquarters, looking at the Walker Sustainable Development logo gleaming on the wall. From a small startup with a handful of employees, we had grown to a team of 52 dedicated professionals committed to revolutionizing the construction industry through sustainable practices. Our first major project, Riverside Heights, the very development that had been rejected by my father's board, was nearing completion. It had already won 2 industry awards for innovation and environmental design, with interest from buyers far exceeding our projections. The tour group from the Environmental Building Council is here, my assistant informed me. Thanks, Amy. I'll be right there. As I guided the group of industry professionals through our offices, explaining our philosophy and showcasing our current projects, I caught sight of a familiar figure waiting near the reception desk. My father had aged visibly over the past year. The confident posture I had always associated with him was diminished, his shoulders slightly stooped, his expression more guarded. After concluding the tour, I approached him. "Dad, I wasn't expecting you today. I was in the neighborhood," he said, attempting a smile. "Impressive operation you've built here, Hugo." "Thank you. Would you like to see the Riverside Heights model?" "It's nearly finished." In the conference room, Dad studied the detailed architectural model of the sustainable community I had envisioned over a year ago. "It's remarkable," he admitted. "You were right about the potential for this type of development." We had established a cautious professional relationship over the past few months. Walker Development had contracted Walker Sustainable for consultation on several projects, a business arrangement that kept us connected while maintaining appropriate boundaries. "How are things at the company?" I asked, though I already knew much of the answer. He sighed, challenging. "The Blackwell Tower situation nearly bankrupted us. We've had to scale back significantly." A pause. "Amanda left 6 months ago. Took a job with her mother's friend in California." I nodded but offered no comment about Amanda or Veronica. That chapter was closed. "And Veronica?" I asked finally, knowing I couldn't avoid the subject forever. "The divorce was finalized last month," he said quietly. "You were right about her pattern. The financial investigation revealed she had been systematically directing company funds to personal accounts. She's facing potential charges." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I took no joy in my father's pain. "Don't be. It was my own blindness that created the situation." He looked at me directly. "I owe you an apology, Hugo, for not seeing what was happening, for not trusting you, for choosing her over my own son." The words I had once desperately wanted to hear now brought a complicated mix of emotions. "We all make mistakes, Dad. What matters is what we learn from them." "I've learned a lot," he said ruefully. "About business, about trust, about family. The company will survive, but it's a shadow of what it once was. What it could have been with you at the helm." "That wasn't my path," I replied. "As painful as it was at the time, leaving forced me to create something of my own. Something I believe in completely." We talked for another hour, not as executives, but as father and son beginning the long process of rebuilding trust. There were no quick fixes, no magical reconciliations, but there was a foundation for something new. The healing process hadn't been only professional. My friends had been instrumental in helping me rebuild my sense of self-worth outside of my father's shadow. "You know what I love about the new Hugo?" Layla had said recently. "You're building something because you believe in it, not to please anyone else." Jackson agreed. "You seem lighter somehow, like you're finally living your own life, instead of the one mapped out for you." They were right. The painful separation from Walker Development had ultimately freed me to pursue my true passion without compromise. Our company now had projects in 3 states, with a reputation for excellence in sustainable design that attracted clients specifically seeking our expertise. The most unexpected outcome of this journey was my own personal growth. I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed, resilience I hadn't tested, and values that remained unshaken, even when everything else crumbled. The evening after my father's visit, I stood on the rooftop garden of my new apartment building, watching the sunset over the city skyline. My phone buzzed with a text from George, who had ultimately left Walker Development to join my company as CFO. Latest industry rankings just released. Walker Sustainable rated number 3 among up-and-coming development firms nationwide. Congratulations, boss. I smiled, remembering my father's words years ago. This will all be yours someday, son. He had been right, but not in the way either of us had imagined. What was mine now was something I had built myself, something authentic and aligned with my values. The betrayal that had once threatened to break me had instead become the catalyst for my greatest achievement. As I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years, I realized that sometimes silence truly is the most powerful response to betrayal. Not silence born of fear or submission, but the strategic silence that allows you to gather your strength, plan your path, and build something new while others underestimate you. The lesson I carried forward wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about staying true to yourself when those closest to you fail to see your worth. It was about finding the strength to create your own path when the one you expected is suddenly blocked. And most importantly, it was about recognizing that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted opens the door to discovering what you truly need. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you respond? I found that staying silent and focusing on building my own success was more powerful than any confrontation could have been. Let me know in the comments if you would have handled things differently. And do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it resonated with you. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes your greatest strength emerges from your deepest disappointment.